Okay, well, welcome everyone. Great to have you all here. I'm joined by Mitch and Betsy, and today we're talking about year 2 of SEO. Year 2 is in quotations, and we'll talk about that. But basically, we're talking about what comes after all of the content production that you kind of start with in the first year. So anyway, I'm Chantal, the Director of Marketing at Demandwell, and I'll pass it over to Mitch.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Glad to spend some time with you guys. And yeah, unplanned for everyone to be able to talk, but hey, let's use it.
Let's roll with it.
You
Yeah.
guys want to talk, bring it up. So yeah, I am CEO and co-founder here of Demandwell. And yeah, excited to share some stuff about year 2 of SEO. Pass to Bets.
Hey, everybody. I'm Betsy. I see a lot of familiar folks in here, so hi to everybody. I'm head of customer growth at Demandwell, and I'm really looking forward to this today.
Awesome. All right. So to get things started, I think let's first talk about the dominoes of SEO and how there's this like natural progression that people have to follow in order to be successful with SEO. I think also this is related to like the question of is SEO working or not? And people kind of like think of it as a binary thing, but the dominoes are related to like single keywords. And yeah, if you guys just want to riff on that dynamic and what that is for a while, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, totally. You hit a couple of the bullet points right on the head there too. I think the common question is whether it's from your board or from whoever's on C-level at a company saying, we're investing X into SEO. Is SEO working? And there's I just think that's kind of a flawed question. I think it's the right question to ask, but it is flawed. And the reason is because there's such a gradient of is SEO working or not. And in particular, as Chantal mentioned, on a per keyword basis, is this working or not? There's, different definitions of that. So, but that's super vague and you can't go to a board or, C-level and say, well, it's complicated. So, just trust me. So instead, we like to talk about this like domino effect, which essentially starts with creating content as like the first step. You can't rank for something if you don't have a piece of content to rank for it. And then that leads into, the impressions that you're getting from ranking. That leads to clicks or traffic or users, whatever you want to call that, or someone's actually taking a look at your website because you are ranking in organic search. And then it comes to, are they actually converting? Are they turning into leads? And then are they turning into deals and revenue? Hopefully, you can track all the way down to that level depending on your tech stack. So the question is SEO working or not? Well, is the answer that we're looking for, is it driving revenue? Or is it that impressions are growing, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, that has been a really useful tool for me to, when I was kind of in the seat of doing SEO. It's a really helpful tool to explain like, hey, we have many of these keywords are at step 1. These keywords are all the way at the end. They are driving revenue. So like, yes, for those keywords, they are working. These other ones, they are working, but they have some more work to be done on them. And that concept is really a lot about what we're going to talk about today. Is if you've created content, it started to work, but it's not doing anything beyond just ranking. You're not getting impressions. You're not getting traffic for it yet. What do? You've created content, but now what? So that's a lot about today, what we want to cover. But Bets, I've been rambling here. Anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that it's that idea of that progress is performance, and to give yourself credit for the steps along the way. You're going to probably see impressions initially, and then you're going to feel like it's just impressions. What's that going to do for my business? Because I'm really looking to impact the bottom line. But give yourself credit for those, for that work, because that's one of the first steps is to get it indexed, get yourself some impressions, and then keep working down the line so that you can actually get to those conversions in a step progress or process. And so don't think of it like, if I'm not getting conversions, it's just not working. You're probably just not getting conversions yet.
Yeah, this is like each keyword to get to page one or to get to that coveted first spot. Like, I mean, some might get there once you publish the page, but like, let's be honest, that's the minority of the time. And most of the time it's going to take multiple concerted efforts to get to that kind of like final dream scenario. And wait, Melinda says something in the chat. Need this for your board meeting. Great. Well, hopefully we'll have some good fodder coming out of today. Some good talk tracks. Okay. I think also we have a really not funny, but a helpful analogy potentially about winning the Olympics. If you could share, Mitch.
Yeah, totally. So to ask if your company's SEO is working on or not is to also, like, in my mind, is kind of as complicated of an answer as if someone says, I haven't watched the Olympics in a while, so I'm gonna say Michael Phelps. Did Michael Phelps win the Olympics? It's like, well, he won like the races that he was in, or the whatever you call it, the swimming in a line that he was in, but he didn't also win the biathlon, which is my favorite Olympic sport. He didn't also win snowboarding. He didn't also win skiing. Like, there are so many things. There's so many different ways to compete in the Olympics. And it's the exact same thing with SEO, that every single keyword is its own race. And we talk about competitors a lot, like, who are your top 3 competitors and stuff like that. That's really helpful to learn from. But at the end of the day, every single keyword you have has its own unique set of competitors and all that. So you need to focus on, how do we win this race for this keyword? And where am I currently at in the rankings? Am I close? What do I do then? Am I far away? All that stuff. So,
yeah.
And
if an athlete is a company, like, the athlete can get gold for certain events and they can get bronze for certain events, and a company can be in the first slot for certain keywords and they can be, on page 2 for certain keywords. And it's really keyword. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the keywords are your athletes, and your brand is the United States. So it's like, think of it like each keyword is in a competition, and you're all a team, and each one of them has to do their job.
Yeah, totally.
My mind was absolutely blown the first time I watched the Olympics in a different country, because I was so used to seeing mostly American athletes being featured. And then I was in Canada one time during the Winter Olympics, and it was like all Canadian athletes. And I just was like, wow, I live in a bubble. Crazy. Anyway, let's transition to talking about lifecycle stage, because that is kind of, if anyone on this call hasn't heard us say lifecycle stage yet, this is like pretty foundational to how we're going to be talking about what year 2 looks like today. So yeah, let's quickly define lifecycle stage. I can pull up the dashboard to show people where they can see lifecycle stage if you haven't seen it yet. But yeah, take it away.
Yeah, so I'll kick us off on that one too. So lifecycle stage is a demand well defined thing. The high level, whether you're a customer demand well or not, the high level is just the idea of, as I mentioned, there's those different stages, there's the different metrics, there's all sorts of stuff through the journey. And we were just explaining that over and over and over again, and we didn't have it like codified into an easy to understand or repeatable fashion. And so every time we describe it, maybe it's slightly different or whatever. And so we said, we're saying the same thing over and over and over again. Why don't we go ahead and just like codify it, make some rules around it, that just is an easier shared language for us to talk with each other and to talk with our customers, and to have our system be like recognizing certain things based on stage. So The point is, if you don't have a codified way of talking about the progression of a keyword, make sure you come up with whatever way you're going to do that. If you choose to, align to similar to our lifecycle stage, great, but it doesn't have to be. So I'll just share. So lifecycle stage is it ranges from 1 to 5, and I'll just give you a high level definition of each stage. So stage 1 is you're not ranking for a keyword at all. Stage 2 means that you are ranking, but you are not on page 1. Stage 3 means that you're ranking on page 1, but you're not in the top 3 results. And that might sound like there's a pretty wide gap there for stage 2. That you could be ranking 100, or you could be ranking 11. And the wild thing is that is such a broad stroke, but the actions to be done are actually often very similar within that whole spectrum. So, but back to the life cycle stages. So stage 3 is you're on page 1, but you're not in the top 3. Stage 4 is you are in the top 3, but you don't have a high enough click-through rate. So people are seeing your brand and your website and all that, but they're just not clicking on it. There's certain things you should do for that. And then stage 5 is basically like you're done with SEO, and now it's time to work on conversion rate optimization. So you're in the top 3 results and you're getting a great click-through rate. So those are the 5 stages. So you're not ranking, you're ranking but not page 1. You're ranking on page 1 but not well. You're ranking well but not getting clicks. And then lastly, you are ranking well, you are getting clicks. Now it's time to like really focus on conversion rate optimization. So that's the progression. That's how we talk about it. And yeah, as you can see here, this is actually in our platform. So we've got a lot of stage 1 keywords here. So we do not rank for these currently, but we do have, I think, what would we say, stage 2 there. So content planner tool right there. Or any of the ones that say stage, content planner tool. So that one we do rank for, but we have room to grow to get onto page 1 and keep moving from that. So in that instance in particular, if someone says, "Hey, is SEO working?" Well, if we had tried to rank for that and it was not ranking, I'd probably say, for that individual keyword, no. But currently, we can see that we are ranked at least somewhat. And so the answer is a partial yes, and now we can continue the journey on that keyword.
Betsy, any thoughts on life cycle stage generically?
I was just going to mention, and we had talked about this the other day, I always think of life cycle stage 1, 2, and 3 as your ability to influence the search engines. And then life cycle stage 4 and 5 is really where you're trying to influence the people who are using the search engine. So you want to get them to click, you want to get them to convert. And the first 3 are the main focus there, where it's like, we're trying to influence Google here and get them to position us in a really great place.
Totally. So basically in year 1 of SEO, a lot of what we advise people to do is like create content. You need to like build your keyword strategy, figure out what you want to rank for, and just build content and go after those terms aggressively. And that is basically taking keywords from stage 1 to stage 2. So you're not on the board for them, and then you get indexed for them. And I think like it's kind of a hard mindset shift potentially to go from go, we're just knocking out fresh new content, to then saying like, okay, now what do we need to do? And how do we make decisions about what to go after now to get from this, like, okay, we're indexed for a bunch of stuff, but we're not quite seeing results yet, to we have like really high rankings for a bunch of things, and we're driving traffic and we're driving conversions and yada, yada. So can we talk a little bit about like, what are the tactics and what's the mindset shift that needs to happen to go from you're creating content to get on the board versus you're on the board and you need to go to that next level?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think the mindset shift, I think, is absolutely critical, and I think it's different than what some may naturally do. And so what I mean by that is what I often hear, our customers doing is they'll go through, call it year one or 6 month chunk one or whatever, this burst of creating new content. It's really exciting. It's really fun. You're starting to see that your website is ranking for things that maybe you thought you never could. And then you look at the next steps and you say, okay, that is now my world, and I want to make my world better. That is a really dangerous trap to fall into because it's incredibly limiting down to only what you have done. So I think a lot of that comes from, it's a lot of work. And so when we look behind us and we see all the work that we did to get there, we say, okay, I put in a lot of work. Therefore, I don't need to like really seek out new things with that. I just need to make that work better. But at the end of the day, when Google or Bing or whoever are looking at your website, they're not looking at how much work did you do. And so back to the Olympic athlete analogy, they're not looking at like how many times did you work out before you came to this. They're saying, did you beat or get beat by the people that were running that race next to you? That's it. They don't care. You could have worked out once or a million times. And so when we look back and we look at our effort and we think, oh, wow, I just did a lot. I don't need to do more of that. I can shift to doing something else. It's a mistake. So the first part is when you get to the point where you've got enough, call it stage twos. So you're starting to rank for things. When you've got enough of those that you feel like it makes sense to really shift gears and put in the time and effort to make those better, I would just challenge everyone to not pivot to that, but add that. So add those actions into the mix, but continue creating new content to rank for new keywords as well. That's where a ton of huge gains come. So before we even get into like what should you do for stage two, I just really encourage, once you get to stage two, do not forget stage one. It is and always will be incredibly critical to make sure you're growing that. So from a stage two perspective, so you are ranking for your keyword, you have landed in the search results. I, as Chantal said in the very beginning of this, I've had the experience of, I've landed in position 1 on day 1 and got 100 leads by the end of the week that I published that piece of content before. So it can happen quickly. But what's more, what tends to be the case is, landing somewhere in position 30, 40, 50, and you've got some room to grow. So no one's going down to page 4, 5, 6 to find what's going on down there overall, right? Generally speaking. So it's critical to really focus on those things, and the time that it takes to actually, achieve that growth can be a long time. I've got one keyword in particular that I worked on at a former company. It took me like 4 years to get to page 1. But once we did, it started generating millions of dollars in revenue for that company. So again, is SEO working or not? Well, it was, but we were in progress for 4 years before we actually, got the money back. So anyway, I know we've got a handful of specific tactics. Bets, do you want to talk about supporting content?
Yeah. So one of the things that our SEO success managers will typically recommend doing, and that I just think is important in general, is to sort of cluster your keywords so that topically you're kind of like creating a group that you want to elevate and that you want to win for. So this would be like multiple different pages. And then kind of like, if I could whiteboard it, I would, but like you want to win for a target keyword, you should probably create like 10 pieces of content around that one to help support that piece of content. And then you're essentially telling the search engines, hey, I really know like I know about this topic. We know so much about this topic that we've got multiple pages on our site. But this page is really the page that is our like prime page for that specific target keyword. So you're essentially creating other pages that surround it to elevate it up. And typically want to include an internal link back to that page. And we call those supporting pages or supporting posts on our side of things, just because, you know, it helps you to kind of realize like, I actually need many of these, more than one of them to really elevate a single keyword.
Yeah.
We actually have a whole SG Weekly session on internal linking and topic clusters and how it's all related, which I'm going to share in the chat now for anyone who wasn't there. So if you want to dive deep into that conceptually, be our guest.
And I know
Sorry,
that we've
Mitch.
said we've used the Olympic analogy quite a bit. I think I kind of like, I think of it like a team, right? Like it is truly like a cluster of keywords. And you're really wanting to win for them, and they're all going to sort of help elevate the team win.
You know what sport is
about,
perfect for this actually is cycling, because you have a cycling team and you have, yes, you want one person to win. And so you have these teammates who are working really hard to help that single person like win the race.
Yeah.
But the team wins, everything's working together.
I mean, and it is kind of like, that's kind of what I meant when I said that about the Olympics, that like, you know, you're all a part of team, whatever country. And that's sort of how it is with the keywords. Like they're all a part of helping your brand win. And this is like, you know, like you said, cycling or cross country, like everybody's running for themselves in cross country, but you're all still on a team together. And based on where you win for each one of those keywords determines whether or not the team actually wins the sport, determines whether or not the USA got the most medals or whatever out of the Olympics. But with supporting content in particular, you're really trying to elevate a single keyword up using multiple pages around it to sort of build that foundation.
Yeah. And one thing we talked about in the internal linking one is that like you have these silent supporters who seem like they're losing pages. Like they seem like they're like, oh, they're not high up in the SERP. No one is seeing them. They're not getting any organic traffic, but that's the point. Like they exist to support that single winning page.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think that I hate to add more analogies to an already analogy rich conversation.
Lean in, baby.
I think one like kind of phrase I've said for a long time is like search engines reward encyclopedias over dictionaries. Because in an encyclopedia, it is describing the thing that you're, talking about. Let's say it's an encyclopedia whatever article about the Olympics, right? You're going to hear about a lot of different things, whereas you're going to hear about the different sports, you're going to hear about the different athletes, the different countries, and the purpose behind it, and the history going back to ancient times or whatever. But a dictionary definition is going to say it's a competition of athletes, right? It's like just that. And so when someone is searching the internet and they look for, hey, tell me about the Olympics, search engines typically are going to serve up something that is deeper and broader. So that's another analogy. But then yet another analogy that I was thinking about this morning, so I want to share it because it's super interesting, and it actually kind of is kind of backed up in a couple of searches that I did. So I like to think about, so I love scuba diving. It's like one of my favorite things to do in the world. It's very depressing living in Indiana and having that be a hobby of yours. There's not many ocean, not much ocean access around here, but I love scuba diving. And so the next best thing, if you're landlocked, is an aquarium. And so I like to think about this stuff in terms of like, what if you were running an aquarium? And when you think about that, an aquarium has a bunch of different possible things that they are displaying, like possible different animals and all that stuff, different environments, all sorts of stuff that they could do. But at some point they have to decide which ones, they're going to do. And so, I've been to a lot of aquariums. The Indianapolis Zoo here where I'm at, I really like their aquarium. They've got, penguins. They've got like small little anemone, like really cool anemones. And then like one of my favorite things is they actually have a like petting area where you can actually like touch stingrays and these like tiny little sharks too. So your kids, I've got 3 boys, they can touch sharks, like that's so cool. Not every aquarium has, shark touching there. So like when I think of aquariums around the country, like Indianapolis you can touch sharks. That's so neat. But there's that's probably like the best thing there. One of my favorite aquarium experiences was in Boston, and they have this, I think it's called like giant Pacific octopus or something like that. It's this red octopus, and I was there on a day when it was active, and it's usually just like sleeping, and it was just incredible. So in my mind, when I think about an octopus, I think about Boston. But there's this bucket list one that I've never been to, which is the Georgia Aquarium. And the Georgia Aquarium does not just have, 1 or 2 things. It has 120,000 animals in over 10 million gallons of water, all at this aquarium. They have whale sharks that you can swim with. They have manta rays, all this stuff. I've never been. I want to go there so bad. So the point is, they have areas of the aquarium, and then within each area, they have a ton of animals. So you can't just go like one layer deep. You've got to go deep and wide. And when you do a search for what's the best aquarium in America, tends to be the Georgia Aquarium, because it is so huge, it covers so much and all that stuff. So anyway, it's an analogy I like to use. Thought of it this morning, actually, for the first time, searched for that this morning. But the idea is, can you cover the different environments, the different categories of animals, and then within each category, can you have a bunch of animals within those? And so in the same way with content, we can't just, create one level of content. We can't just create one piece of content for each category that we want to rank for. We need to create that kind of core piece as the category, but then we also need to create a bunch of supporting content beneath that to prove that, hey, we actually really are the best, and best often in search engines means largest or biggest or most robust as well.
Yeah. So we've talked about like, in terms of getting from life cycle stage, 1 to 2, you create the initial piece of content. To get from 2 and beyond, you create, multiple pages around that topic, and you have internal links like directing the search engines to this one specific most important page. And then there are other things we haven't talked about yet, which is, so we talked about internal links, but we haven't talked about links from external sites, and we haven't talked about like adding more content to your main pillar page. I might be missing some things, but let's cover some of those other tactics that people can do.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So with regards to adding more more copy to a single page, you're just leaning into that encyclopedia that Mitch was talking about. You're really giving like a depth of knowledge. And so Google's going to reward that. They're going to see that as an extensive piece of copy. They're going to recognize you as someone who really knows about that particular topic. And there's so many things that influence search engines, and sometimes you can have somebody jump in. You can be winning for a topic. Let's say you create one page and it's just like crushing it. And then it's in position, it's in position 3 and you're driving a ton of traffic for it. And then out of nowhere, I was just talking to Mitch about this earlier today, out of nowhere, like some big dog comes in, right? Like they've got like Harvard Business Review, right? Like they're just like this really well-known, really influential, brand and recognizable. And Google's going to reward them right out of the gate because they know that they're this reputable domain. And so it could just like, yeah, exactly. So it could just like wipe you out completely out of that position. And so some of this stuff isn't necessarily to get yourself from, indexed to number 2 to number 3, but it's also to help you secure that position. Because the analogy I said earlier today was about a trampoline, but one I'm going to use is, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Bridge of Terabithia, but there's a little boy who's like the fastest runner in the neighborhood and in the town. And then this girl moves in and she runs faster than him. And so like for the longest time, he's like, and I won't tell anymore because if you haven't seen it, you really should. But he's like, oh man, now I'm being, this girl's outrunning me. And that could happen at any point in time with regards to like your keywords. Harvard Business Review could come in and just start running faster than you with regards to any keyword that you're positioned for. So like, you just have to keep practicing, keep positioning yourself in a really great spot by putting that supporting content around those target keywords, making sure those internal links are there so that you've like created these foundational, like, I'm putting my stake in the ground on this one. And that'll help secure your position and it as well as continue to move you further up in position.
Mm-hmm.
The Harvard Business Review example is an interesting one because that also brings like authority and a history of endorsements into the equation, where it's like, if you're a small fry and in a site that has been around for a very long time, has incredibly high authority, probably has like a whole, like many years worth of backlinks and stuff. And that's why what Mitch was saying initially is so important, where like, you can't forget about continuing to go after stage 1. You can't forget about just like continuing to build out your library and build out your authority, because you still need to compete with like the big dogs potentially as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like adding that additional copy is just another one of those things that's going to help you secure position, move up in position, create that encyclopedia experience on your site that will build authority to Google about who you are and what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like we've said the words internal links quite a few times already, and they are absolutely critical. Maybe it makes sense to spend a little bit more time just describing that a little clearer. To set that stage, I would say that it is equally as important to connect the dots as it is to have the dots. So if we have, 1,000 pages on our website, but there is just no way that someone can actually navigate to each of those, and therefore a search engine can't navigate to those, it's almost going to be like those things don't exist. And so, for the aquarium analogy is like, if you have all of these different exhibits, but you don't have sidewalks in between them, or they're all like walled off, right? There's no way to access them. Doesn't really matter if those exist or not, because they're not going to be experienced. So it is absolutely as critical to make sure that you are connecting all of the pieces together. One simple way there's a lot of ways to do that. But one simple way to do that is, as you are creating a cluster of keywords, making sure that all of those pages that you're building within that cluster, that they are all connected to each other. And you can do that a number of ways, but the kind of most basic way is to say, if you've got one category keyword, that should be like the primary page. And then as you create this, what we're calling supporting content, each of those supporting pieces should link up to that primary page. And again, they can all link to each other. So all those supporting pages should link to each other. So you might have 9, 10, 20 links on a certain, on each page pointing to those other pages, but making sure that they all link to the primary category page is absolutely critical. So that's like the kind of first step. If you have not done that before, if you have not implemented internal links, I'd recommend doing that. There's some more advanced stuff beyond that too, but I think if you at least do that, you'll see some significant improvement.
One thing we talked about in the internal linking workshop was that you probably don't want to have more than like 15 to 20 links going out from a single page, but it's kind of unlimited the number of links that you can have going to your most important pages. So you can send an incredibly strong signal to the search engines of like, if you care about this topic, go to this page times 300, you know, so you can really get your message across in that way.
Yeah. So then the third, or I don't know if we're on third or fourth here, another bucket of things to do is actually up-leveling existing content. So when you do create a piece of content that takes you from stage 1 to stage 2, so you're not ranking, you publish, and then now you are ranking, we definitely recommend creating that supporting content around that. But sometimes it's not enough. And so to keep it going even further is to take your encyclopedia article and actually extend that article itself. So whatever that first page, that core page was that you created, actually just simply adding content to that page can have a really strong signal in Google. There's a few things happening there. One is Google definitely rewards they have like some sort of freshness score in the algorithm. So, regularly making changes on pages in general probably means that those pages are going to be, viewed as better. This is why, when you're looking at, most articles that you see are probably written within like the last 5 years. It's very few things that you look up that you're going to see something from like, 2002. There was stuff written back then about the thing, but it's just not as new. And so there's some sort of freshness, meter within that. And then the other big thing that's also related to time is that user behavior changes over time. And so if you created a piece of content, 4 years ago, or maybe you're new to the company and a predecessor did, right? Someone created content 4 years ago about, subject X. It's almost guaranteed that over the course of those 4 years, some of the words that people are searching that are related to that are probably the same, but there's probably some new ones too. And so by adding that additional content, you can do, new keyword research, make sure that you're adding in those new or changed user behaviors while also indicating to search engines that, hey, this is not just something that we wrote and forgot about, but it's something that we care about and are nurturing along the way.
Yeah. I want to make sure we talk about how people can sort of like wrap their heads around all these different levels of work that they're supposed to be doing for SEO every quarter. I know some of our customers, actually, first I'll speak about what we do. So like, I think it's really common for marketers to have a plan to increase top of funnel activities. They have a plan to convert those into demos. They have a plan to convert demos into customers. And we should think about SEO in kind of a similar way where like you should have a plan for here are the tactics that I'm going to do to get a bunch of terms from stage 1 to stage 2. Here are the tactics that I'm going to do to get my like ranking, but not that well terms to stage 3. And then, so maybe we can talk about that a little bit to help people kind of like, we just mentioned a ton of different things that people can do. Like, how do you wrap your head around it and actually get the work done in a quarter?
I think there's actually like a handful of ways that you could go about it, just depending on your preferred workflow. I like to cluster them and say these are the 3 topics, or we call them campaigns. These are the 3 campaigns that I want to win for right now. And I want to think of, maybe anywhere between 15 and 30 keywords inside of each one of those campaigns that are related to each other. And then just start working inside of those so that you can see, you'll really be able to see your work and all that progress that I was saying, progress is performance. You'll be able to see that progress turn into, the performance metrics that you want, because it'll just be very specific to the way that you're organized underneath those campaigns. And that goes for, inside of a campaign, you may have keywords that are in lifecycle stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if you have three campaigns that you're working on, then, giving yourself, okay, these are all my lifecycle stage 1 keywords. I know that in campaign 1, 2, and 3, I have a total of 12 pieces of copy that are brand new pieces of copy that I need to create and go work on. I've got X number of keywords in lifecycle stage 2. Okay, that means that I need to create X number of pieces of supporting content around those and add internal links. And maybe this one's doing pretty well. It's like in position 11, but I'm just not on page 1 yet. Maybe I need to beef that piece of copy up and add an additional 700 word count to it. And so if you're thinking inside of those like sort of pillars of campaigns where you're organized in that way, it'll allow you to maintain focus and then also be able to see the needle move pretty well.
The thing that's really nice about that approach also is that like marketing teams, if they work in topics for creating blog posts and white papers and all of that too, like I know some teams structure their work around like, this is the main theme for this month. You can also create like downloadable content that matches with your SEO topic clusters as well. And then that kind of, it just, there's a nice systemic effect when you take that approach.
Yeah, and then you're able to say, okay, at the beginning of the quarter, my focus is going to be intentionally on these 3 campaigns. And then as you're reporting up internally inside of your company, you can say, our plan is to focus on these 3 campaigns. And I've got this many that are in life cycle stage 1, this many, and these are the actions that I'm going to take for each different life cycle stage. And then by the end of the quarter, once you've done that work, you can clearly see, okay, we weren't ranking, or we had X number in life cycle stage 1. Now we have none in life cycle stage 1. We're actually ranking for every keyword inside of this campaign. And we've moved our life cycle stage 2s to however many, and just sort of see that progress in that amount of time by setting those goals for yourself and keeping yourself organized. And then you're able to report up and show that progress as performance, because you say, I was being intentional about this. These are the 3 areas that we wanted to go after. We wanted to win for these, and we were intentional with the work that we were doing, and here's the results. And then next quarter, do 3 more campaigns and try to go after those, while keeping an eye on your previous quarter's campaigns to make sure that Harvard Business Review doesn't come in and bump you out of place for all of those things. So it's an ongoing thing, but if you allow yourself the ability to stay organized in that way, then it doesn't make it feel so like, oh, I've got 1,000 keywords that I need to go win for, and they're all over here and over here and over here, and I'm doing it all. I feel like I'm doing so much work, but I'm not seeing it actually in the results. But by intentionally focusing on those campaigns, you can look back and say, we said we would do this, we did this, and we saw this as a result of it.
Love it. Mitch, do you want to talk about the like different life cycle stage, organizing by that?
Yeah, sure. So I love that approach. And I almost hesitate to muddy the waters with the second approach, but there is a second approach. And I do typically recommend doing both. So that approach was, what are the most important things for you? Identify what life cycle stage each of those are in, and then that therefore dictates your actions. The other side of it, and why I do typically recommend is the opposite. So basically saying, giving yourself a budget of it's just different. It's not better or worse, and you should do both. But it's give yourself a budget of how many new pieces of content you're going to create in a quarter. And that those are going to be, dedicated to stage 1s. So, part of those will be part of what we just talked about with the campaigns, and whatever ones are in campaign that are stage 1, that gets priority. But then you might still have 10 left over that you have budget and resources and everything to create. Still create those and pick those other keywords, but pick them based on life cycle stage. So basically going through every single life cycle stage and saying, I'm going to look at the most important ones within stage 1 and put together a plan for that. Second, we'll look at stage 2 all the way through stage 5. So you end up having like that one's the reason why I hesitate to share it is because what Betsy described is much more like in line with business and goals and all of that stuff. And the other one is more in line with, simply actions and like action goals. But I do think both are important, because at the end of the day, like, keep doing the right things right in SEO and it will pay off. And so, if you do have like just a kind of a blind budget for, stage 2 is we're going to create X amount of content, and you do that over time, that adds up, and it ends up being positive. So what I would suggest in true practicality is, if you're feeling what Betsy shared, which is, I'm doing all this stuff and it's all over the place and I feel overwhelmed, I would just do what she said. Group 3 campaigns together, or three campaign worth of keywords together, group those together, and just focus on that. If you are feeling pretty comfortable about what you're doing, you've been using campaigns for a while, stuff like that, maybe then like the next step would be, okay, let's look at stage 1's, look at everything by stage, and have that budget of how you're going to impact each stage.
What's nice about your approach, Mitch, is that it builds a little bit more room into it for like the unpredictability of search engine results. So like with Betsy's approach, you're being really proactive, you're going after topic clusters, whatever, you're like, it's more intentional and more proactive. However, like, we don't always know what's actually going to be successful in the search engine. So if you take a life cycle stage approach, it's actually, you're then able to react to what works. And if something ends up in life cycle stage 3, you have your finger on the pulse and you can get it to life cycle stage 4 and 5. So that's just an interesting element and kind of another argument for doing both, I guess.
Oh, totally. I used to have customers ask me all the time, like, should we go really deep, narrow, or should I go wide? And I think Mitch's approach is that like wide approach, and this is like the narrow approach. And a lot of times my recommendation was, let's go wide first, see what's working, see what areas that we can really lean into, and then cluster them into categories, so that you do get what you do get the benefit of what you said, Chantal, where it's like, we really don't know what's happening out there in the search space across all of these different topics. Let's just go wide and see what sticks. And then you may be like, all right, well, we gobbled up a whole bunch of them in this area, so let's like set up a campaign for that. And then, and then really dive deep into that area. Another analogy, a water analogy, you're throwing fish nets out, and you're throwing a fish net out over the entire bay. And it's like, we don't really know where the fish are hanging out in this bay. So let's throw a net out all over it. And then it's like, okay, clearly they're hanging out, really, like a whole lot of them are hanging out in this area. So let's lean into that area and set the boat there and like hang for the whole day. And that would be like what your campaign is. You're spreading it wide and then drilling in deep.
Love that.
It's also a question of like, in the keyword research process, when you're first getting started and you're building out these keywords that you want to go after, it's like, on the one hand, you have terms that you need to rank for as a business because maybe you are a CRM software. And so you kind of just like have to go after that. But then there's also like how people are behaving in the search engine. And that gives you a bunch of information too, that like might not be the thing that your business would necessarily be like, we are this, we will go after this, but people are using that language to arrive at, I need a CRM solution. So that's also kind of part of the conversation, I think, of like, what are you intentionally going after? How are people searching, and what's the reality in the search results? I also just want to remind everyone, if you have questions, we have about 8 minutes left, so please put them in the chat. We'd love to hear what you have to say, or if anything has been confusing and you want clarification, please let us know. Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking and stretching metaphors until 1 p.m. Let's quickly talk about the relationship between funnel sort of intent of a keyword and how that impacts like the way that life cycle stage often moves.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier, which was these kind of 2 examples on a website I worked on in the past, where one keyword I created a single page for, and it was like a download. And within the first week of that being live, I had 100 leads come in. So 100 people downloaded the thing within that first week. It was wild. So it went from stage 1 to stage 5 real quick. I mean, it was like basically within a day or two. Contrasting that, the other keyword that took me like 4 years to go from stage 2 to stage 4, it took about 4 years. The biggest difference between those was funnel stage. So the one that happened really quickly was incredibly high funnel, and over time we had like tens of thousands of people downloading that thing over time, but we would actually get business from like 0.00001% of those leads. Whereas, contrasting that on the other one, it took a while, but it ended up being incredibly valuable and legitimately drove millions of dollars for that same company. So it's not an exact science, but I would say that the higher the funnel a keyword is, probably the quicker that it will move through life cycle stages. But again, it depends on the competition around you, more than anything.
I want to make sure we answer Melinda's question. I see Betsy just dropped something in the chat. So if everyone can, or, feel free to take a look there. I'm also going to maybe share my screen and explain it one other way, which is like in relation to the actual search results. So if I am a CRM company and I've created a page for CRM, actually, first, let's say I'm a brand new CRM startup and I am not ranking for CRM software at all. That would mean I'm in lifecycle stage 1. I do not rank for this term. I'm not indexed, but I create a page, and say that page gets to the third, I'm saying page a lot, the third page of the search results. So let's say it's Creatio, which I've never heard of before in my entire life because they're on page 3. I have heard of Pipedrive though, and I'm surprised that they're so low. Anyway, Pipedrive has a life cycle stage of 2 for this keyword for CRM software. They could do a bunch of work to get to life cycle stage 3, which is where these people are. They're on page 1. And these people have like a certain number of tactics that they could take to get into life cycle stage 4, which is these top, of course, Salesforce is there. Yeah. Okay. So these are the top 3. We have Business News Daily, Salesforce, and G2 Crowd. And then within that, if you're driving tons of traffic and you're driving conversions, that's what makes you top of the line, lifecycle stage 5.
Yeah. So on that third one, the difference between 4 and 5 to us is Salesforce might be ranking second here, but maybe people are sick of hearing about Salesforce and they don't want to click on it. And so, they're only getting 1% of all the clicks that are clicked, on this page. Whereas, everyone knows G2 is going to give you, a bunch of examples and you can do comparison, and maybe that's what most people are really looking for. So they may have like a 30% click-through rate. And so that would be the difference between, 4 and 5. So if 30% of the people who searched for this query clicked on G2, that would be, that would put them really into the, lifecycle stage 5 echelon. But, if Salesforce, even though they're ranked second, if they had a very low, 1% click-through rate, then they would be stage 4.
Fantastic. And let's wrap things up by answering Carrie's question. How do you prioritize content creation for SEO with limited resources for getting that content created? Great question.
Yeah, absolutely.
My gut says that it's related to what we talked about in terms of like chunking out the different levels of work that you have to do in a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I think there's like prioritizing prioritizing which keywords to impact is one thing. Prioritizing creating content in and of itself is maybe a whole, other issue. And I'll say a quick answer there. With our customers, we see there's really two types of content creation out there, and we call them builders or buyers. So you're either the one creating the content, you're building it, or you are buying that content from someone. It could be from Demandable, it could be from a freelancer, it could be from, fill in the blank AI tool, whatever it is. There are, you're either buying it or building it. And so if you're buying it, making sure that you are optimizing your process and making sure that it is as cheap to create as possible so that you can get the most that you can from your money. But if you're the one building it, definitely keep efficiency in mind and make sure that you are, again, optimizing your process throughout the entire, content creation process so that you can get as much done as quickly as possible, so that you can get on to the other stuff that, most folks want to get onto, like the fun brain stuff, or like actually creating the download behind the form, instead of just the copy that's going to get people there.
There's also like AI now that has made content creation faster and cheaper than ever. So you become an editor instead of a writer if it needs to be in-house. But to Mitch's point, it's about like finding the cheap thing that's scalable, and it's not easy. It's definitely a challenge. Like work has to be put in, but it's possible.
And repeatable too. I think finding the systems and the workflows that allow you to sort of do the same thing, rinse and repeat for different keywords that you want to win for, so that you take sort of that that start to scratch from start to scratch, like that entire process, and sort of simplify it for yourself by creating a repeatable rinse and repeat for every single piece of content.
Yeah, and I think too, just maybe one more thing, Carrie, because I see your follow-up comment there about it is about creating a ton of content without limited resources. I would just challenge you to think about what is a ton, because to some people that means like 2 pages a week or something like that. And the processes you come up with when your goal is 2 a week are very inefficient. But even if you never do this, if you just go through the thought exercise of what would it take to publish 100 in a week, that will shift your thinking about the process in total. So even if you only do 2 in a week, you're the process that and you're using that process that could get you 100. You're going to find tools, find process improvements, all that enable you to create content a lot faster, even with those same amount of resources. Easier said than done. But
yeah. And it still takes a ton of work.
Yeah, and it takes a lot.
Cool. Well, on that note, everyone buckle up, buckle down, get your elbow grease going. Thank you so much for joining us, y'all. We are at time. This has been a really fun topic. Mitch, Betsy, thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom. And hope to see you all next week. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks all.